Hello, boys and girls, and everybody else. Welcome to tonight's video where you are going to sleep ASAP with me. Thank you for choosing me to help you sleep. Before we begin, I have your monthly Raid Shadow Legends update. Thank you to Raid for sponsoring this video. Most of you will know that I have been playing Raid now for almost a year. Raid has got lots of amazing qualities such as badass champions, regular updates, years of playing millions of players. It's got it all. So what is Raid? Caught in the middle of an epic struggle that's raged for thousands of years, you'll fight noble kings and dark wizards. You'll uncover prophecies, curses, betrayals, and meet more than 12 warring factions. This game brings back everything that I remember from childhood and more. Make sure to head to the links in my description and download Raid now. So, what do I love about the game? Well, let me show you. Look at this, don't you just love the really cute festive themed homepage? So, as always, I love to go to the portal and I like to see what I've got. So this here is the ancient shards. I'm just going to summon them and see what we get. I love the excitement of seeing what fantastic champion that I'm going to add to my collection. I also really enjoy the clans, and I do have my own clan, which is SMASMR, clan tag SMLW. So I also really like having a look and seeing what new kind of champions there are from the index. And you can see there that there's lots of different factions and there's so many champions to collect. And I'm really excited to be collecting more and more champions and adding them. I also really enjoy the gameplay. I like kind of working out what the best move is and what order to move their players in. So yeah, it's really good fun. So, what is new for the festive season? This month, Raid has just released their biggest ever update. The main event is here, and that is the Doom Tower. It's a giant tower with 120 floors, a bunch of secret challenge rooms, and 12 seriously badass bosses to take on. On top of that, they're also releasing 14 awesome new champions just in time for the holidays, along with a whole host of holiday events and tournaments. There's really never been a better time to start playing, and here's the best part. The Raid team are giving away a bunch of new free goodies plus a super special champion to help get everyone started in the tower. Bulwark. He's absolutely awesome in the clan boss, and he's also going to be a huge help in the tower against those bosses. And I also have something super special to show you. I'm just going to pull them right out of my game. Ta-da! Look, we have our own champions. Festive champions helping put up a Christmas tree. If you want to get a huge head start in Raid, all you have to do is hit the link in the description, and if you're a new player, you'll get your free Void Champion Bulwark, 50 gems, an XP booster, some energy refills, and even an ancient shard as soon as you get in the game. All of this treasure will be waiting for you here, so what are you waiting for? I'll see you in game. Okay. So now that we have gone through Raid, let's continue with the sleep ASAP with me ASMR experience. So please join me for some deep breaths to begin, okay? Breathe in and out, and in and out, and in, and out. That's it. Let your stress just fade away. So, I thought I'd begin today with trying to knock you out ASAP. And to do that, I'm going to do a couple of touch sequences, which are a trigger I love to do, and I will have a dedicated touch video soon. But just a couple of touch sequences to really help you relax, okay? So to help calm your mind, we're going to be touching your forehead, your ears, your throat, and your eyes. Okay, that'll be your forehead, your ears, your throat, and your eyes. I'm going to come a little closer. I've got a very satiny dress on today. Okay, right, just close your eyes and focus on the touch, okay? Touch your forehead. Touch your ears. Touch your throat. Touch your eyes. Touch your forehead. Touch your ears. Touch your throat. Touch your eyes. Eyes. Touch your forehead. Touch your ears. Touch your throat. Touch your eyes. 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 There. Nice and relaxed. Now, to make sure that you have good dreams this evening, I'm going to touch kind of another sort of sequence we're going to do. Okay, so we're going to touch the top of your head, touch your cheeks, touch your ears, and touch your heart. So that's head, cheeks, ears, and heart. Okay? Okay. Touch your head. Touch your cheeks. Touch your ears. And touch your heart. Touch your head. Touch your cheeks. Touch your ears. And touch your heart. Touch your head. Touch your cheeks. Touch your ears. And touch your heart. Soon, soon, cuddle and croon over the crinkling sea. The moonman flings him a silvered net, fashioned of moonbeams 3. And some folk say when the net lies long and the midnight hour is ripe, the moonman fishes for some old song that fell from a sailor's pipe. And some folk say that he fishes the bars down where the dead ships lie, looking for lost little baby stars that slid from the slippery sky. And the waves roll out and the waves roll in, and the nodding night wind blows. But why the moonman fishes in the sea, only the moonman knows. Soon, soon, net of the moon, rise in the wrinkling sea. Bright is the fret and shining wet, fashioned of moonbeams 3. And some folk say when the great net gleams and the waves are a dusky blue, the moonman fishes for 2 little dreams he lost when the world was new. And some folk say in the late night hours, while the long thin shadows slide, the moonman fishes for cold sea flowers under the tumbling tide. And the waves roll out and the waves roll in, and the grey gulls dip and doze. But why the moonman fishes in the sea, only the moonman knows. Soon, soon, cuddle and croon over the crinkling sea. The moonman flings him a silvered net, fashioned of moonbeams 3. And some folk say that he follows the flecks down where the last light flows, fishing for 2-rimmed golden specks that play from his button like nose. And some folk say while the salt sea foams and the silver net lies snare, the moonman fishes for carven combs that float from the mermaid's hair. And the waves roll out and the waves roll in, and the nodding night wind blows. But why the moonman fishes in the sea, only the moonman knows. I just love that so much. I think it's such a beautiful little song, and I just love to sing it to you. It wasn't really a sing, was it? I'm going to actually sing you another one just now. So, it's not quite singing, but it's a little lullaby for you, okay? So, hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird, and if Mama's gonna buy you a billy goat, and if that billy goat won't pull, Mama's gonna buy you a card and pull, and if that card and pull fall down, you'll still be the cutest little baby in town. Very sweet. So we have a couple of little sound triggers now for you to help aid your sleep. We have lavender, gentle, beautiful lavender, to just inhale and relax to, just so peacefully. It's very crunchy. I do love the smell of lavender, and I like the crunchy sound. You may be able to tell that today I'm sitting in a different spot. I'm in my bedroom. I'm facing the window. So we're just using natural daylight, although it is very, very cloudy and just ready to rain. It's very heavy, heavy clouds, storm clouds, just ready to leak and catch us wet. And my little doggy Hugo is currently out doggy daycare, so he will potentially get rather soaked. So we're just going to gently brush, use some classic little triggers to help you sleep. And then I have another bedtime story for you. I'm not so sure what you prefer, but I tend to only use triggers now in just sections of my videos, like objects. I don't know if you prefer them to be used all the way through, or you're happy just having little sections of triggers, just to keep it nice and varied. I hope, be able to head into town this weekend some really more kind of festive videos for you the week of Christmas. Get you into the little spirit. I know you've got it in there. I still don't have my Christmas tree up because I don't have any carpet in my living room. I'm waiting for carpets. I was telling my channel members last week that the carpets were meant to be fitted at the start of this week, but the carpet store went on fire and my carpet was in it and got destroyed, and the name of my carpet is Campfire. So they had to reorder and try and get some more in. So I have got my Christmas tree delivered, but I haven't been able to put it up yet because they'll need to move. There's no point putting a Christmas tree up because when they fit the carpets, they'll need to move it about. So that's why. Okay, I'm going to actually read you now this story, which is called The Tiredness of Roosevelt. It's just a short little story, but we're going to read it. I like the shorter stories. I think this. Let me see. Okay. At the corner of Oxford Circus, Roosevelt bought a bunch of violets, and that was practically the reason why she had little tea. For a scone and a boiled egg and a cup of cocoa at Lyons are not ample sufficiency after a hard day's work in a millinery establishment. As she swung on to the step of the Atlas bus, grabbed her skirt with one hand and clung to the railing with the other, Roosevelt thought she would have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner. Roast duck and green peas, chestnut stuffing, pudding with brandy sauce, something hot and strong and filling. She sat down next to a girl very much her own age who was reading Anna Lombard in a cheap paper-covered edition, and the rain had tears spattered to the pages. Roosevelt looked out at the windows. The street was blurred and misty, but light striking on the panes turned their dullness to opal and silver, and the jeweller's shops seen through this were fairy palaces. Her feet were horribly wet, and she knew the bottom of her skirt and petticoat would be coated with black, greasy mud. There was a sickening smell of warm humanity. It seemed to be oozing out of everybody on the bus, and everybody had the same expression, sitting so still, staring in front of them. How many times had you read these advertisements? Sapolio saves time, saves labour. Heinz tomato sauce. And the inane, annoying dialogue between doctor and judge concerning the superlative merits of Lampau's poetic saline. She glanced at the book which the girl read so earnestly, mouthing the words in a way that Roosevelt detested, licking her first finger and thumb each time she turned the page. She could not see very clearly. It was something about a hot, voluptuous night, a band playing and a girl with lovely white shoulders. Oh heavens! Roosevelt stirred suddenly and unfastened the two top buttons of her coat. She almost felt stifled. Through her half-closed eyes, the whole row of people on the opposite seat seemed to resolve into one fatuous, staring face. And this was her corner. She stumbled a little on her way out and lurched against the girl next to her. "I beg your pardon," said Roosevelt, but the girl did not even look up. Roosevelt saw that she was smiling as she read. Westbourne Grove looked as she had always imagined Venice to look like at night. Mysterious, dark, even the hansoms were like gondolas, dodging up and down, and the lights trailing luridly. Tongues of flame licking the wet street, magic fish swimming in the Grand Canal. She was more than glad to reach Richmond Road, but from the corner of the street until she came to number 26, she thought of those 4 flights of stairs. Oh, why 4 flights? It was really criminal to expect people to live so high up. Every house ought to have a lift, something simple and inexpensive, or else an electric staircase like the one in Earl's Court. But 4 flights. When she stood in the hall and saw the first flight ahead of her and the stuffed albatross head on the landing, glimmering ghost-like in the light of the little gas jet, she almost cried. Well, they had to be faced. It was very like bicycling up a steep hill, but there was not the satisfaction of flying down the other side. Her own room at last. She closed the door, lit the gas, took off her hat and coat, skirt, blouse, unhooked her old flannel dressing gown from behind the door, pulled it on, then unlaced her boots. On consideration, her stockings were not wet enough to change. She went over to the washstand. The jug had not been filled again today. There was just enough water to soak the sponge, and enamel was coming off the basin. That was the second time she had scratched her chin. It was just 7 o'clock. If she pulled the blind up and put out the gas, it was much more restful. Rosabelle did not want to read, so she knelt down on the floor, pillowing her arms on the windowsill, just one little sheet of glass between her and the great wet world outside. She began to think of all that had happened during the day. Would she ever forget that awful woman in the grey mackintosh who'd wanted a trimmed motor cap, something purple with something rosy each side? Or the girl who'd tried on every hat in the shop and then said she would call in tomorrow and decide definitively? Rosabelle could not help smiling. The excuse was worn so thin. But there had been another. A girl with a beautiful red hair and white skin, eyes of the colour of green ribbons shot with gold they got from Paris last week. Rosabelle had seen her electric brougham at the door. A man had come in with her, quite a young man and so well dressed. "What is it exactly that I want, Harry?" she asked, as Rosabelle took the pins out of her hair, untied her veil and gave her a hand mirror. "You must have a black hat," he'd answered. "A black hat with a feather that goes right around it, and then right around your neck and ties in a bow under your chin, and the ends tuck into your belt, a decent-sized feather." The kiddo glanced at Rosabelle laughingly. "Have you any hats like that?" They had been very hard to please. Harry would demand the impossible, and Rosabelle was almost in despair. Then she remembered the big, untouched box upstairs. "Oh, one moment, madame," she had said. "I think perhaps I can show you something that will please you better." She had run up, breathlessly cut the cords, scattered the tissue paper, and yes, there was the very hat. Rather large, soft, with a great curled feather and a black velvet rose, nothing else. They'd been charmed. The kiddo put it on and handed it to Rosabelle. "Let me see how it looks on you," she said, frowning a little, very serious indeed. Rosabelle turned to the mirror, placed it on her brown hair and faced them. "Oh, Harry, isn't it adorable?" the girl cried. "I must have that." She smiled again at Rosabelle. "It suits you beautifully." A sudden ridiculous feeling of anger had seized Rosabelle. She longed to throw the lovely perishable thing in the girl's face and bent over the hat, flushing. "It's exquisitely finished off inside, madame," she said. The girl swept out to her brougham and left Harry to pay and bring the box with him. "I shall go straight home and put it on before I come out to lunch with you," Rosabelle heard her say. The man leant over her as she made out the bill, then, as he counted the money into her hand, "Ever been painted?" he said. "No," said Rosabelle, shortly realising the swift change in his voice, a slight tinge of insolence, of familiarity. "Oh, well, you ought to be," said Harry. "You've got such a damned pretty little figure." Rosabelle did not pay the slightest attention. How handsome he had been, she had thought of no one else all day. His face fascinated her. She could see clearly his fine, straight eyebrows, and his hair grew back from his forehead with just the slightest suspicion of crisp curl. His laughing, disdainful mouth. She saw again his slim hands counting the money into hers. Rosabelle suddenly pushed the hair back from her face. Her forehead was hot. If those slim hands could rest one moment. The luck of that girl. Suppose they changed places. Rosabelle would drive home with him. Of course, they were in love with each other, but not engaged, very nearly, and she would say, "I won't be one moment." He would wait in the brougham while her maid took the hat box up the stairs following Rosabelle. Then the great white and pink bedroom with roses everywhere and dull silver vases. She would sit down before the mirror, and the little French maid would fasten her hat and find her a thin, fine veil and another pair of white suede gloves. A button had come off the gloves she had worn that morning. She had scented her furs and gloves and handkerchief, taken a big muff, and run down the stairs. The butler opened the door. Harry was waiting. They drove away together. That was the life, thought Rosabelle. On the way to the Cartland, they stopped at Gerard's. Harry brought her great sprays of Parma violets, filled her hands with them. "Oh, they are sweet," she said, holding them against her face. "It is as you always should be," said Harry, "with your hands full of violets." Rosabelle realised that her knees were getting stiff. She sat down on the floor and leant her head against the wall. Oh, that lunch! The table covered with flowers, a band hidden behind a grove of palms playing music that fired her blood like wine. The soup, and oysters and pigeon and creamed potatoes and champagne, of course, and afterwards coffee and cigarettes. She would lean over the table, fingering her glass with one hand, talking with that charming gaiety which Harry so appreciated. Afterwards, a matinee, something that gripped them both, and then tea at the cottage. Sugar, milk, cream. The little homely questions seemed to suggest a joyous intimacy. And then home again in the dusk, and the scent of Parma violets seemed to drench the air with their sweetness. "I'll call for you at mine," he said, after he left her. The fire had been lighted in her boudoir, the curtains drawn. There were a great pile of letters waiting for her, invitations for the opera, dinners, balls, a weekend on the river, a motor tour. She glanced through them listlessly as she went upstairs to dress. A fire in her bedroom too, and her beautiful shining dress spread on the bed, white tulle over silver, silver shoes, silver scarf, a little silver fan. Rosabelle knew that she was the most famous woman at the ball that night. Men paid her homage. A foreign prince desired to be presented to this English wonder. Yet it was a voluptuous night, a band playing and her lovely white shoulders. But she became very tired. Harry took her home and came in with her for just one moment. The fire was out in the drawing room, but the sleepy maid waited for her in the boudoir. She took off her cloak, dismissed the servant, and went over to the fireplace and stood peeling off her gloves. The firelight shone on her hair. Harry came across the room and caught her in his arms. "Rosabelle, Rosabelle, Rosabelle." Oh, the haven of those arms, and she was very tired. The real Rosabelle, the girl crouched on the floor in the dark, laughed aloud and put her hand up to her hot mouth. Of course they rode in the park next morning. The engagement had been announced in the court circular. All the world knew. All the world was shaking hands with her. They were married shortly after at St. George's, Hanover Square, and motored down to Harry's old ancestral home for the honeymoon. The peasants in the village curtsied to them as they passed. Under the folds of the rug he pressed her hands convulsively. And that night she wore again her white and silver frock. She was tired after the journey and went upstairs to bed, quite early. The real Rosabelle got up from the floor and undressed slowly, folding her clothes over the back of her chair. She slipped over her head her coarse calico nightdress and took the pins out of her hair. The soft brown flood of it fell around her warmly. Then she blew out the candle and groped her way into bed, pulling the blankets and grimly honeycomb quilt closely around her neck, cuddling down in the darkness. So she slept and dreamed and smiled in her sleep, and once threw out her arm to feel for something which was not there. And the nights passed. Presently the cold fingers of dawn closed over her uncovered hand. Grey light flooded the dull room. She shivered, drew a little gasping breath, sat up, and because her heritage was that tragic optimism which is all too often the only inheritance of youth, still half asleep, she smiled, with a little nervous tremor around her mouth. Okay, Well, thank you so much for joining me for tonight's video, and I will